Welcome everyone to today's class. I hope you've been practicing what we've learned so far. During our last class, we stopped at editing ribbon group. I promised during our last class that we will go through the options we have in Go to Special in our next class. These options are very important to us, and that's why we cannot ignore them. So without further ado, let us jump into our learnings today. I have generated this data set to use it for demonstration of the GoTo Special. Of course, you know that GoTo Special is under Home Ribbon tab, and then navigate down to Editing Ribbon Group. That's where you find and select, click and drop down, and then select GoTo Special. Another way to bring the dialog box out is to use your keyboard shortcut Ctrl+G. It will bring this GoTo dialog box, and then you can click Special here and it will bring it out also. Another way, if you want to use your keyboard without using the mouse, is to press your Control key down and press G. When it brings up this GoTo dialog box, press your Alt key and press S. It will take us to GoTo Special. I hope that is understood. That being said, we are going to select notes in this data set. Now, automatically note is selected. It is the first option in this GoTo Special dialog box. When I click OK, it will select any of the cells that has notes on it. Example, this red triangle you see here represents notes, so I added notes there. So when I click OK, Excel will automatically highlight those cells. Let's see what happens. Click OK. And you can see that outstanding is highlighted and Charlie Babs also highlighted. So when you point your cursor right there, you will see the note that Charlie Babs is the most outstanding student. That's the note I typed. If you come to outstanding also, you can see the note there that this is an outstanding performance on the subject. Keep it up. So Excel automatically highlights anywhere you have notes in your data set. I hope that is understood. What you have to also note is that immediately you finish the last one, click outside. Always click outside to deselect or remove the highlights from the very last option that Excel selected for you. For example, as I click outside, you can see that those highlights are no more here. And then let's go to the second option there. The second option is constants. When I click this constants, or when I click this radio button for constants, you will see that automatically numbers, text, logicals, errors will be checked. Let's see that. I select my constants and immediately numbers, text, logicals, and errors as checked. So now what Excel will do is to highlight all the constants that are numbers, text, logicals, and errors. Now you may ask, what are constants? Constants are those data, whether text or numbers, that were entered manually in this data set. That being said, let us click OK. Now you can look at this data set and see that all the constants whether they are logicals, whether they are errors, whether they are text or numbers are highlighted. I hope that's understood. And if I want to give all of them a background color, remember your cell style. I can come and give them any of these colors. The moment I click, it will apply to them, but I'm not going to click, right? So when you click, what you are seeing right here on screen will be the result of clicking this good. But for now, I am not going to click it. Let's click outside to deselect or de-highlight or remove the highlights from this constant data. The next one is still on constant, but this time around I'm going to uncheck text, logicals, and errors such that Excel will only give me constants that are numbers when I click OK. Watch. Now these numbers are constants, meaning that they were entered manually or copied and pasted. Let's click outside and check the next option under constants. Select your constants. Now this time around, remove or uncheck numbers, uncheck logicals, and uncheck errors. We want to look for only texts that are constants. Click OK. And Excel will automatically highlight all the texts that are constants in this data set. I hope this is understood. Let's click outside again, or anywhere in the data set. Must not be outside. Let's go back. Still on constant. The next is logicals. Now, what are logicals? Logicals are those data that are true or false, yes or no. Those are logicals, right? For example, I manually entered this column. True, false that you are seeing here, I manually entered them. But the ones you are seeing here were generated by a formula, right? So since I manually entered this column, it means when I click OK here and constant logicals are selected, checked, when I click OK, it will highlight that very row or column, sorry. That's very column. You can see it here. I hope that is understood. These are constants that I typed in by myself. They were not generated by any formula. The next option, still on constants. Go to Special, select your constants. Now uncheck numbers, text, logicals. The next one is errors. This refers to any cell that has error, constant error, meaning that I manually typed in the error message, right? So now if I click OK, you can see that this value and this red, they are Excel error way of telling you that, look, there is something wrong with this data. So now if I click right here, you can see that there is no formula here. It was manually typed. And if I also click here, you also discover that there is no formula that generated this. I hope that is understood. So since they were manually entered or manually pasted, they are constants, right? Let's click outside again. So let's continue. Okay, so the next option in Go to Special is the formula. So when you select formula, the same set of checkboxes for numbers, text, logicals, and errors are automatically checked. So if I click OK now, all the formulas, whether they are numbers, text, logicals, errors that are generated by formulas will be highlighted in this data set. Now let me click OK for you to see what will happen. You can see that these texts were generated by a formula. This colon also was generated by a formula. The same thing is applicable to this colon, this colon, this, and this colon. So all those columns were generated by formulas, whether they are texts, whether they are numbers, all of them, or errors, right, or logicals, they were all generated by formulas. I hope you understand that. But if you want to check them differently, what I mean is, you want to only see the texts that were generated by formula, or errors that were generated by the formula or formulas, or logicals that were generated by a formula, or numbers that were generated by a formula. You can do that. Let's just click outside to deselect or remove these highlights from this data. Back to go to special formula. I'm now going to uncheck text, logicals, and errors. When I click OK, you will discover that only numbers that were generated by formulas will be selected or will be highlighted. You can see these numbers. They were all generated by formulas or a formula. I hope that is understood. In the same vein, let me click outside or anywhere in this data set. I will go back and select go to special again, formula. This time around, I'm not going to select or look for numbers. I am going to check texts, formulas, or texts that were generated by formulas. So I will uncheck logicals and errors and click OK. All the texts that were generated by formulas will be highlighted. I hope that is understood. The next one right there, still under formulas, is logicals. Now, what are logicals? Logicals are yes or no data, true or false, right? Remember last time, Excel highlighted this column for us, and this column this column is a constant because I typed them in. This time around, we are going to use this column that were generated by a formula. So as I have checked these logicals under formula here, it means that it will only select the logicals that were generated by a formula. Watch. You can see that this very column is selected. This column was generated by a formula. The texts you have here were generated by a formula. The next option still there under formula is errors. There are errors that were generated also when formulas were entered. So those are the ones that will be highlighted when I click OK. Now let's click OK. You can see these errors. These are errors that have formula in them. If I click any of them and look at my formula bar, you will see a formula right there. These are errors that were generated with formula, right? So that's how it works. The next option is the blanks. So when I select blanks, it will highlight all the blanks that I have in my data set. Now, why is this important? As data analysts, you don't need any blank in your data set. The process of cleaning a data, removing blanks, is one of them. So when I click OK right now, after selecting blanks, it will highlight all the blank cells that are in this data set. Let's check it out. Click OK. Now you can see that it highlights all the blanks here and even outside. You can see why it highlighted the blanks that are outside this data set, that I still have other data down. So in this region, it takes the whole of this place, it combines the region here and then highlighted. That's why, because I have data up to this point, that's why it highlighted all these other ones. I hope that's understood. So if I select this data set now up to this point, it means I have created a region by selecting this table or this data set. So let's check that again. Blanks, and click OK. You can now see that it selects only the blanks that are within this data set. All right. And as I said before, you can come to your styles and then use color to differentiate those blanks. You can use any of the colors of your choice, right? But I'm not going to click for it to apply. I'm just showing you this. It is good for visualization when you are working with your data or data set. I can click anywhere for it to remove the highlights on those blanks. The next option is current region. We just talked about region a few minutes ago. So if I click OK, you can see that it selects this region. We have different regions here. All right, this extra is because my cursor was there. Let me put a cursor in this data set, then repeat that again. You can see that it only selects or highlights this data set or this table right now. There's no expansion to other places. Meanwhile, we have other data sets here, and then objects and so on. I hope you understand. Now, let's go to the next option. The next option is current array. When I select it, all right, before I select it, let me show you something. Now here is my array formula. This place right now. If you look at the formula bar, you can see the array here. Okay. If you look at the formula bar, you can see the array that generated these numbers right here. What I did was just to create an array and multiply this row, or this column, sorry, and multiply this column by 2 to generate this. So looking at this place, you will see that it's a formula, or it's an array formula. So for example, to highlight this array, I have to put my cursor right here in one of those numbers. So I go back to my go to special, and then I select current arrays and click OK. It will highlight down to 10. It will highlight this column down to where I have 10 here. Let's see. Click OK. You can see that the array is being highlighted. Don't bother about knowing how to create array right now, because we'll do that later. This one is just for demonstration of the options that we have, or current array option that we have in go to special. The next option there is objects. Now, what are objects? Let me cancel this. What are objects? Objects are things that are not text. They may be text but pasted as objects too. In that case, you cannot edit. If you can recall, when we did paste special, paste as picture. So once you paste anything, any text as a picture, it changes that text to an object. All right. So anything, shape, picture, object, all these ones, icons, and so on, are all objects. Like 1, 2, 3, 4 here, all these ones are objects. And so if I want to select all of them at once, the manual way of doing it is to click one of them and press down shift and click them one by one like that. Then these 5 are grouped objects. So if I click any of them, it will highlight the 5 of them, right? But the fastest way to select all of them at the same time is to use the go to special object or select object option. So let's do that now. Go to object, click OK. All of them will be selected right now. You can see that all of them are selected. You can move them around or do whatever you want to do with them. So that is how that select object in go to special works. The next option right in go to special is row difference. Row difference. Now let me cancel this. If you look at this section and this data set, or this data set right here, it will seem as if everything, or this column and this column are the same, but they are not entirely the same. This is just a small data set. Assuming you have a very large data set and you want to check and they look the same, and you want to check whether there are differences in the rows, right? You will use this option in go to special. So let me highlight this place. I go to find and select, go to special, and I select row difference and click OK. You can see that in this very row there is a difference. This is 1425.25, while this one is 1425.35. The same thing is applicable to this place, to this row. Right now, this one is 5986.36. This one is the same number but 0.35, right? So it says selected the differences in the rows. The same thing is applicable to column. If I highlight this to this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 columns, and I want to check the difference in columns, still use the same go to special to say, okay, I want to check column difference. Once I click OK, any two columns that are different will be selected or highlighted. Look at it. This and this look the same, but they are not the same. This value and this value almost the same, but they are not. This value and this value look the same, but they are not. So think of having a very large data set, to compare if they are the same or not. So you use this option to make sure that you differentiate. You will be able to differentiate between the numbers, both in rows and in columns. I hope this is understood. The next option we are going to learn in our go to special is the precedence. So the precedence option is used to locate and highlight all the cells that directly or indirectly influence the value of a selected cell, right? So this is particularly useful, in formulas and complex spreadsheets. So where you need to trace the dependencies of a cell. So for example, let me cancel this. This data here was calculated from this cell. So if I want to trace where this qualified was coming from, if you look at the formula here, you can see what was written to generate it, right? So if I go to my go to special and select precedent, and of course, what does direct precedent do? So these are the cells directly referenced in the formula of the selected cell. So if I click OK right now, you will see that Excel will select the direct precedent that generated this data. So let's click OK and see. You can see that it jumps to this very point here, right? So you can see that this value was gotten from here, right? So the formula is that if the star is a permanent star, then write qualified. If not, unqualified. That's why you see this qualified here. So that's why when I click the precedent in go to special here, direct only, it jumped and selected this very value here, or this very data here, right? So that's how it works. in the same vein, if you want to trace all the cells that produced this value, we can go to special again, precedence, but this time around I will select all, and when I click OK, it will select all the cells that contributed to the generation of this value here. So let me click OK. You can see that this value here has to do with this colon and this colon. The next option we are going to learn about in Go to Special is the dependents. This very option here. And what it does is the reverse of what precedent does. This dependent option feature in Go to Special is used to locate and highlight all the cells that are directly or indirectly affected by the value of a selected cell. So it's a reverse of the precedence option, as it shows where the selected cell's data is being used. I hope you understand that. Let me cancel it and put my cursor right here where we have permanent star. You see there's a formula that generated this, right? So I now want to see if there is any value in this data set that depends on this very value here, right? So I go to Go to Special, select my dependents. Direct only option is selected here. So if I click OK, you will see that the cursor jumps to these two and tells me that, look, these two data here are dependents of this data here, right? So you see that it does opposite of what the previous one, dependents, did. So that's how it works. You can trace precedents and then dependents. Now finally, in dependents, let's go back. Let me put the cursor somewhere else. Then I go back to my Go to Special, select dependents, and this time around I click all. So let this show me all the dependents of this value here. So when I click OK, it selects the dependents too, right? You can see this part, these two here are dependents of this cell that is here. And if you look at the formula, you still have something to do with this, right? So that is how dependents work. So the next option in Go to Special is going to the last cell of a given data region, right? So remember when we selected the other time, the Excel expanded the selection and came down here. So our last cell, when we click last cell, it should take the cursor to this region or to this area around this place and select the last cell of this region, right? So let's try that. This is currently where my cursor is active. So when I go to Find and Search and then select Go to, and then select my last cell, click OK, right? You can see that my active cell now is the last cell, as the last cell of this region is this very cell that is here. That's just all. But assuming you have a very long data set, maybe up runs into thousands, it will take it to the last cell. So the next one we are going to learn is the visible cells only option in Go to Special. This is the option I'm talking about. Now, before we understand what it does, let's come back to this series of numbers or data set. Now, if I decide to hide number 2 by right-clicking on the row number and clicking hide, and maybe doing the same thing, hiding number 7 also. Right click, hide. You can see that this series, there is no number 2 again, and there is no number 7, not because they were deleted, but because they are hidden. So if I copy and paste that series or data set, you will still see that in as much as I'm pasting them here, within the range I copied the other one, those other values that were hidden are pasted also, but they are still hidden. So if I want to reveal everything, I will go out of those row range, and paste it maybe below here, Control V or Control plus V to paste. If I scroll down, you will see that number 2 is revealed right here. What if I don't want that number 2 and number 7 that are hidden right here to show when I select and copy? That is when we make use of visible cells only. Right, so I'll come back to this very one and select it. I'll go to Special, select visible cells only, and then click OK. Right? And so when I copy and come down here to paste, you will see that those numbers that were hidden are not here. So that's what happens when you use visible cells only. It will copy and omit those hidden cells and then paste only the visible cells data. So that's how it works. I hope that is understood. The next option we are going to learn from the Go to Special dialog box is conditional formats. Let me scroll up to our main data set. We have conditional formatting here and here, but let us add more right here. Remember how we do a conditional formatting? I will just use equal to qualified let me use yellow and click OK, and maybe another one here. You can use red text for this one. Text equal to false. I can use just red text and click OK. Now, in order for me to select or highlight conditional formatting in this table, I can go, or I will go to my Go to Special and select conditional formats. Now, when you select conditional format, if you look downward, you will see that another option, all, is selected here. Right? So if I click OK, this all means that all the conditional formatting that I have in this data set will be selected or highlighted. Watch what happens when I click OK. You can see that this column and these other 3 columns are selected. So those are the colons we have conditional formatting, right? Now, if I want to select only the formatting, conditional formatting that are the same, I can just put my cursor here and then go to my go to special and select conditional formats. This time around, I'm going to use same. It means it will select the conditional formatting that looks the same as this, which means this colon will be selected. So when I click OK, you will discover that it will highlight the whole column. You can see now that this column is highlighted, right? So it has selected only the conditional formatting or conditional formats that are the same. I hope that is understood. All right. The last option in Go to Special that we are going to learn is the data validation. Right? Now, what is data validation? This very option is used to restrict users from entering unwanted data into a list or into a data set. So, for example, if a particular cell needs a number, the user should not be able to type in text, right? If that cell needs only texts, the user should not be able to enter any number, right? So data validation helps data analysts to do that in order to get accurate data and avoid mistakes. All right, so in this very little data set that I prepared here, you have the title, name, snacks, and the option. So let me go up and copy few names here. Copy. And then I come down here and paste it as normal values, right? Okay, so the next thing I want to do to make sure that only these three snacks, these three variety of snacks will be what the user can enter here or select from here. I will highlight or select this range of cells and go to my data, click data validation, and I will select a list because this is a list. And the next thing to do, the source, I will select this list here, press enter and click OK. Immediately you see that there is a drop down button by the side of each of these cells that I selected. I will do the same thing here. Select down here, go to data and go to data validation, select data validation, and here I pick or select a list again, and then I click this little button and select the little list of yes and no. Press enter and click OK. So the same thing happens here. Now, if I come back to snacks, if I click this and drop down, you'll see that these three different snacks are here. So the user selects anyone among them. All right, so this prevents error. You just click and select instead of typing. Do that for all of them. All right. So now I can say, okay, let's say we assume that Alice likes bread. And when we ask Alice, do you like bread? Alice will say no. Select no here. The same thing, this one can say yes. This one can say yes. This one may say no. And so on. So we continue to fill the data just like that until we're done with it. Now, we are ready to use go to special to select validated data in our worksheet. So let's go back to home, and then we go back to our editing ribbon group, select fill and select, and then select go to special. I click data validation option, and of course you see that all is selected, which means that if I click OK, the Excel will select all the data validations that we have here. So let's see. As I click OK, you can see that the data validation that I did here, Excel selects all of them, right? Now, if I want to select the same kind of validation, I can just put my cursor here and go to my go to special data validation, and I will select same. So this same now will select only this column. It will not select this column because the option of same data validation is chosen here or is selected here. So when I click OK, you will see that it will highlight this very column. Now let's click OK. You see it highlights this place. So that is how that option works. So that ends our go to special options. We've exhausted all the options that are in go to special. So it is left for you to practice and learn how they are being used from what you've learned today. Practice it. Thank you very much.